I didn't figure out
All right, here you go.
which way to send it, by email or just.
Good evening.
Oh, my apologies.
I'd like to recompose our meeting. We did open our meeting at 6 o'clock, and we are now in the open part of our meeting. The first thing I need is, first of all, I'd like to welcome our guests. Thank you for attending. I would like approval of the minutes from our May meeting. So moved.
Second.
Any concerns about our May meeting minutes? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I need approval of the agenda with nothing changed. Randy?
As written.
As written.
So
Motion
moved.
approved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, John. We do have two individuals that would like to make some public comments tonight, so that is the portion of the meeting that we will head into. Starting with Tracy, and you can just come up. We do have a mic there. This is live feed or a live broadcast, so if you just get close enough to the mic, you can sit if you're more comfortable.
You're good.
Or whatever you're wanting to do. But welcome, Tracy.
Hi, I'm Tracy with Mobile Glass. I've owned the company for 17 years, and prior to that, my father, Tom Hellenbrand, owned it since 1960. We have done repairs and remodels for your schools at Arboretum, Prairie, the Old Heritage, and in the last few years, the interior glass package at the intermediate school. I'm here today just to refresh your memory who I am, that I've been in business in your city, right down on Woodland Drive in Westport, and that we are very interested in doing the Waunakee Middle School project for you.
Thank you, Tracy. Also, we have Rich, is it Rick?
Rick Nelson.
Rick Nelson here, and he also would like to speak to us.
Hi, guys. I just want to introduce myself. We have built the schools in town for the past 30 years, and last year we didn't get the last school, and I just don't want to let this happen. As a local contractor, I've had my hands in all the schools, and I appreciate the work, and I appreciate what you guys do. And I have 4 children in the schools, and my office is right across the street, and thank you very much. I just want to, you guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to reports, we will just have our individual board reports. If anybody has any trainings or attended anything that they would like to share, they may now. Mark.
I attended 2 art shows, the high school and the Heritage Elementary, and so kudos to Jessica Stores and Kayla Proctor for great work their students have been doing. Just really amazing stuff. Secondly, I'd like to also compliment Pat Collins and Scott Krause for the for our
Competency. The competency
right
graduation.
graduation,
Yeah.
and it was great to see 4 kids graduate, and in a really nice setting.
Mhm.
Lastly, I just sent you, or Rebecca sent you, information from the Greater Dane County School Consortium proposal. 2 months ago, about, I think it was mid-April, we had our first meeting. Some Prairie and Middleton school districts have got together, and we're looking at how can we utilize the combined skills of our multiple districts for the betterment of kids. And maybe we can learn from each other in terms of how we can maybe address certain educational issues, address school governance and that sort of thing. And so at that time, Mr. Gutenberg, Jack, and I went to the first session, and there was a lot of brainstorming, a lot of different directions they were looking at going, and they listened and came together with a proposed purpose statement. And essentially what they will be looking for us to do is decide if we'd like to join and participate or not. I believe that's something that we would want to do at our July or at the very latest August meeting, so that Dr. Kelsey Brown can also have an opportunity to look at the ideas. But the statement basically, I'll just read it to you, says that the purpose of the Greater Dane County School District Consortium is to ensure all of our students receive the highest quality education possible. While we acknowledge the uniqueness of each of our districts, we share many of the same challenges and aspirations. We will leverage our collective knowledge and expertise to focus on 3 priorities: eliminate academic, social, and emotional gaps for our students, advance best governance practices, and advocate for public schools at the local, state, and federal level. They propose getting together at 3 different times during the school year, and a suggested membership fee of $500. So to me, it looks like a real great opportunity to get together, share ideas. It's Greater Dane County, and New Glarus was, I think, the most distant school district. But a neat opportunity to get both large and small schools with dealing with common problems together to come up with maybe shared ways to better address them. So something to think about as we get to our next meetings as to whether we'd like to participate as a school district.
If I could just add something to it from the first meeting, and knowing a little bit from talking to a few of my superintendent colleagues, I mean, this consortium was kind of grounded in kind of a brainstorm that took place between a few of our neighboring districts, Sun Prairie, Middleton, and Verona. They were kind of the impetus of really looking at that, even though when you look at the work that happens across the state of Wisconsin in education, that there's often regional needs that are different than what you have across the whole state. And their intent was then to just bring greater collaboration and networking amongst the kind of the regional area to then see how you could jointly either share ideas or forward concepts when you have kind of like constituents. So I think that's where it's been grounded. I think from what, I mean, Tim, you attended the last meeting. I wasn't able to go. It's really intended for school board members, kind of executive level administration, so kind of like the central office administration at a district, and then also for the administrative assistants, there's a piece there to make, because those are the folks that are most heavily involved in some of the work that happens with operating schools. So that's, I think, where it's grounded. I think the financial part was just to help offset some costs for facilitation, and they usually serve a simple dinner as well. I think that's kind of what their intent is. But I'm not sure if there'll be more information coming out with regards to that, but I know that what Mark read is kind of their revised purpose statement that they're really, and then they'll be developing that over like I think they have 3 meetings a year. Is that what they're looking at?
Yeah, so they're looking in early October, mid-January, and then early May.
Yeah. So.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. Anybody else have anything that they want to share? I have a couple things. With the end of the year, there always seems to be a few fun events that we get invited to. One was held about 2 weeks ago at Rex's Innkeeper, and it was for the best of things in Waunakee. And our school district was recognized as the best employer in Waunakee. So thank you, Brian Gabarski, and really the whole school as an entity for making this a great place to work. So that was a fun event and a great award. Secondly, I attended the staff recognition. I know a few other people did. I just want to congratulate formally all of our retirees, all of our staff individuals of the year, both our teachers of the year in each of our buildings, as well as our support staff of the year. We had one Cole Fellowship Award winner this year, as well as our longevity, our 10, 15, up to, I think this year, 35 years. So that was a nice event. Randy being one of those retirees, this is his very last board meeting, regular board meeting. We have several others planned for him this month, though. I also got to attend graduation, both our formal graduation and the competency graduation that Mark mentioned, which is really cool for some of our alternative students. So kind of a fun end of the year events. All right. Anybody else want to add? Dawn, anything? If not, moving on. Our first thing is our school perception survey results. And I think we have some people here, but Steve, you want to intro this?
Sure, thank you, Joan. So on Zoom, we have Bill Foster joining us from School Perceptions. In your packet, you had the opportunity to see what's we're calling the final School Perceptions report. So at last month's board meeting, we did provide the draft result, but did mention that there were some additional surveys still being mailed in and added into the total. So I had a chance to talk with Bill today about the presentation this evening. I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to cover some of the most important points for you to know as board members about like participation, how did that compare to other surveys across the state, key takeaways on the financial part. So there were the 3 financial questions that were posed. And then the other part of the survey was really about superintendent transition. What is the district doing well? What can we improve on? And Bill's going to walk you through those results. We're not going to go through every slide in this very big presentation. Bill's going to cover the highlights, and when we get to the end, if there's something we missed that you want us to go back to, Bill would be happy to do that. So if everyone's okay with that, we'll just turn it over to Bill to walk us through the final report.
Well, great. Steve, could you give me access to share my screen?
I sure can. Hey, Rebecca, can you give Bill access to share the screen?
Yeah, right there.
All right. Let's do that. So Steve's exactly right. I did create just a bit of a briefer report. There is more detail in the report that was shared with the district, but I thought what I would cover tonight are the highlights. And again, if you want to go deeper into anything, we certainly can do that. So here we go. So the report is really organized in 3 primary areas. The background information is the information that was actually in the survey itself. That is important because that kind of creates the context for the responses. So when you scratch your head a month from now and you say, what did that survey actually say? It's in the report. You're going to look at the demographic information and slice and dice it and try to make sense of it a bit, and we'll have time for questions at the end. So again, School Perceptions, we've been around since 2002. Our mission is to help educational leaders gather, organize, and use data to make strategic decisions. I look back and we worked with the Waunakee School District in 2014. On the community side, and you've also using our other surveys along the way for board plan report. Today we're going to go through the community survey. Deadline was April 23rd, and we had 2,205 responses, which raises the question, is that enough? Is that good? And actually you're above average. So the only funny thing about COVID was people actually took more surveys during COVID because they were so bored, they were happy to take a survey. But the average response rate nowadays is about 18 to 20%. You're at a 23.3%, so you're doing great. From a statistical standpoint, you can apply about a plus or minus 2% when you look at the data. When I look at this slide, I always go to the top to make sure our seniors are represented, which they are. You also have a very heavy parent response to this survey, so that's why we've got the 35 to 54-year-olds. They're a pretty good group. Do you live in the district? 89% of our samples said they do. 10% no, and 1% weren't sure, which raises the question, who are these 10% are that are taking our survey that don't live in the district? That is primarily 2 groups. One is staff. So it's a chance that a staff member might drive in each day and work in the district, but they don't live there, and/or a parent that chooses to open and enroll into the district. Both of those folks had an opportunity to take it, but they are not residents. So we remove all non-residents from the funding support question. We did have representation from each municipality, with about 3/4 coming from the village, and then all the way down to the town of Dane at 2%. We checked and we think this is pretty darn representative of the district. We had 18% of our sample that were staff and 58% were parents. So let me just pause right here. Right now, the data that we have, all the data is overrepresented with staff and parents, and we are underrepresented with the non-parent, non-staff. So we're going to remove that bias, and I will explain how we will do that in just a bit, and it's very important. So stay tuned to that. So we get to the first section in the survey that was really talked about the operational section, and that was broken into really 3 components. The first being an $8.1 million referendum that's going to set to expire. We asked folks to consider renewing that on an ongoing basis. We then broke the responses into 3 mutually exclusive subgroups. So this is this idea that right now we've got more staff and parents, so we're going to look at each group separately, and I'll explain why each group is important. Staff came in at 86% supporting that, with them saying no. Staff is very, very important from a communication standpoint. Not only are they talking to parents every day, but they also go home and talk to their friends and neighbors. And if the staff isn't on board with what's being proposed, there's a problem. However, when it comes to voting, staff represents less than 1% of your community. So on one hand, they're very, very important. On the other hand, they don't get a lot of votes. So then we have to go look at parents. And parents are in support of the proposed $8.1 million renewal on an ongoing basis at 67%, with 18% either probably no or definitely no. So better than 3-to-1 support for the proposed first part of that from the parents. And the most important group, we call these affectionately the purple people. They're the most important because they literally represent the majority of your voters. So about 70% of the folks who live in the district neither work in the district nor have kids attending the district. So they literally get the most votes. So as a board member, you want to put more weight on what the non-parent, non-staff respondents say as opposed to the other 2 groups. But even this group is at support at 51%, with 35% saying no. So to help you do that math, we create this weighted average calculation, again with the assumption that 30% of respondent, or 30% of your population are parents, 70% fall into that non-parent, non-staff group. And with that assumption, and by the way we come up with that is we look at the 2020 census, and it says in that it breaks it down by percent of parents and non-parents. So that's what we go off of. It's maybe not perfect, but it's probably pretty darn close. And with that assumption, we landed at a 55.8% support for what I might call the base plan, or the kind of the maintaining the status quo on an ongoing basis. So then we tested 2 additional funding ideas. The first was hourly employee compensation. We explained that we're below average compared to neighboring districts. And we then tested that idea first. So would you support expanding the referendum pay for hourly employees, to pay hourly employees more competitive with neighboring school districts? For all resident respondents, who are at 71%, with 12% saying no. But again, now you've learned, we've got to look at that as in terms of subgroups. And you can see the breakdown: 94% of staff, 74% of parents, and a majority of non-parent, non-staff, or purple people, all believe that that would be something that the district should do. So that was really the first part of the plan, or the expansion of the plan. And the second was to help offset increasing costs. And here you can see the support on an all-resident drop down to 54%. With a lot more undecided, we broke it into those three groups. And you can see the 78% for staff, 57% support from the parents, and then down below a majority at 42%. So this is a concept that either people aren't sold on or they don't understand it. There is a larger than normal undecided group. So in our world, this is typically 10 to 15% of folks are undecided. 30% of parents, 28% of non-parent, non-staff are undecided about that. So this is kind of either they don't understand or they just don't support that, this concept. So then we tested the plan. So if you were to add all three of those together, the 8.1, the increasing hourly compensation at $500,000 growing to $1 million, and then the increasing costs growing from 1.5 to 3 million. We explained it. We showed what the corresponding property tax mill rate impact would be. We then asked the question, would you support such a plan? Staff was in at 82%. The parents were in at 64%. But our non-parent, non-staff purple people, they dropped to 44%. So again, applying that weighted average analysis, we landed at exactly 50.0%. The margin of error was plus or minus 2%. So this all-in proposed plan is really on a bubble. It would be too close to call if you were to put it on the ballot today. There were a couple other sections of the survey. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I do think there were some takeaways. Question was what we called school district feedback. I would say this is going to be more important for your new superintendent in terms of baseline for planning, but it's really a very good baseline as you're starting out. So if everybody would have strongly agreed, your average would be 5. If everybody would have strongly agreed, your average would be 1. So your average can't be higher than a 5, lower than a 1. But then what our software does, and because we've done and used these questions in many, many other school districts, it goes out and puts you in a comparison percentile. So the best you can be is 99th, the lowest you can be is 1st. So you don't want to be 1st in this one. But you can see from a communication standpoint, you are as good as it gets in the school perceptions world. In the area of climate, you're as good as it gets in terms of employing high-quality teachers and staff and effectively partnering with local businesses. And you're in the top quartile for the other 2. And leadership is in the top quartile for all 3 in terms of administration, school board, and heading in the right direction. So all good news there. Oh, then we got one more, academics. Again, you're in the top quartile for the 4 of the 5. And help students achieve their fullest potential. That was one that was modified. We didn't have a good comparison, so there's not a comparison there, but you can see a good high score. So way to go in terms of that data. And there was one other section that kind of got into planning where people could choose up to 5 areas they believe they should focus their planning efforts, or you should focus your planning efforts. So what we did here to kind of help you is we identified the top 5. We put them in blue if they were the same for all 3 subgroups. So you can see for each subgroup what they are. The takeaway here is recruiting and retaining high-quality staff. That's obviously important to staff, but it's also number 1 for parents, actually number 4 for non-parent, non-staff. So everybody has experienced a great teacher in a classroom. They know how important that is, as well as great support staff. That tested high. That was also consistent from surveys we've done with for the district in the past. And then the second one, preparing students for life after high school. That's really the business that people want you to be in, making sure that when students graduate, they're off to a good start. So that was consistent across all 3 groups. And then areas that were less important in terms of planning. where transportation, world languages, and online and distance learning, those are things that are not a planning priority. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not doing well in it. It's just not a planning priority. And then kind of a wrap up with overall satisfaction. Here you can be great, good, fair, or poor. So here you can't get above a 4. How's the district doing in each of these areas? So you can see the raw score. Again, you can't get above a 4, you can't get below a 1. To help you put that into context, our software went out and compared, and you're in the top quartile in 2 of the 4, and then still above the average in terms of managing funds and building pride in the community. So all that came up with a overall satisfaction. How likely would it be to recommend a district to a friend or family member? You were at a 7.93 with a comparison of 7.33, which puts you in the 80th percentile. And I think that is it. So let me pause and answer questions.
Randy, if there's no questions, you want to talk about what you would see the process maybe looking like over the next couple of months?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think one of the things that Steve and I have had some conversations, and I know that we've had them with Bill and his team as well, is, well, what does this data actually kind of set up for us? And I think when we put together the survey, it was really geared at trying to, well, certainly the last part is really to give us kind of a pulse of how our school is perceived in areas that can help Dr. Brown as she moves into the district here next month. But I think the piece that we have from a planning perspective is for the fall referendum. And that's really taking a look at really the 3 key parts that Bill outlined in the survey to begin with. The 1 being the 8.1 million, 2 being the hourly wages, and 3 being the increased cost. I guess from my perspective, I think what we need to do is kind of take some time to kind of digest that information. I know that you have in July a retreat coming up. And I think in the past, there's been an aspect of that retreat to really take some time just to discuss kind of the short-term or long-term financial vision for where the district goes. And I believe that Steve and Allie are going to join you for that retreat to take a look at that. I think from my perspective, as we look at when Bill kind of presented the last piece, saying if you took a look at kind of how we packaged that survey together in that first flush of results, it comes down to really that 50-50 coin flip. This is a really important referendum. So I think the piece that I would recommend is to really take some time to take a look at that data, think about what it is that the community is telling us, and then see how do you modify that moving forward to really address the highest and best needs of the district for the fall. I think you would have hoped that you would have had a very clear answer here tonight, then we could have brought to you kind of resolutions and been done with that process this evening. That's just not where we're at. So I think it's a matter of just taking a little bit more time. You have resolutions that don't need to be approved till August, and I think you take that full time to really review what the options are. From my lens, it seems like you have support for the 8.1 million. It seems like you have support for the staff increases. And I would agree with Bill that there's some clarity that needs to be created with regards to the increase in costs. And I think some of that is tied to, when you look at the other data, it's very high in support of staff and high retaining and recruitment of staff. Part of that increase in cost is also tied to that. And then there's other pieces that have just been bundled together that may be a piece that you have a conversation as far as either what fits into that third part of the referendum, what's the most critical part of that, and then how do you put those pieces together to have listened to the survey that the community has shared, but also put forth an accurate message as far as what the district needs from a sustainability and a growth model. But I think it's a balancing piece of that just requires more discussion and more dialogue, and I wouldn't rush it. Don't try to make that decision too quickly. It's not a July decision. It's probably an August decision, and if you needed to push it, I believe, Steve, resolutions don't need to be approved till probably the third week in August. You can take some additional time if there's an additional meeting in there to really vet that out to make sure you're all on the same page. But I think that's kind of what I see the next process as being, and tonight was just the first step to really have give Bill an opportunity to explain his process, his methodology. I really appreciate how he weights those in comparison to our district demographics. That's built off of from census data, so it is data grounded. And then utilizing that information, which provides you feedback, to now winnow down what are the things that we feel the community supports, where do we need to communicate stronger, and then how do you modify some pieces moving forward to address the immediate needs of the district. So I think that's really the conversation and the steps that need to be laid out next. Is there anything I missed, Steve, that you'd like to add?
I think so.
I'd like to, Bill, can I ask one question?
Sure.
Okay, so for the third financial part, there's a pretty large number of undecided or haven't made up my mind. Do you have any sense of how many of those people we could convince to, or what could we do with that number? Can we split that?
It's a great question. Some of it might be specific to Waunakee. Some of it might be just general economy and whatnot. So 5 or 6 years ago, when we would do these surveys, we would typically see about a third of the undecided break to yes.
Okay.
What we've seen in results statewide in the last couple of years, given higher interest rates, higher inflation, more uncertainty, things like that, we're not seeing that happen on a state level basis. That's not to say you couldn't be unique and special, but it's hard, and it's hard to get people's attention, and then it's, not only do you have to get their attention, then you have to educate them and explain to them, especially to the folks who are those purple people that they're not engaged in, and it's hard to get some information out to them. So it's not that you shouldn't try, but it's hard to move them these days.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Don? All right, thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Have
Bill.
a good night.
Moving on to committee reports, starting with curriculum committee.
We only have one action item, but I would like to mention we had a really full meeting. Let me get to my notes here. We had background on schoology, which was very helpful to hear how that works to the benefits of both staff and students. We had a very strong introduction to artificial intelligence, and again, how that is being used on multiple levels within the district already, both for staff and students. And from my perspective, if the board would be interested in having a presentation on AI, the participants were more than willing to work with Tim and the board to set something up down the road for whether it's late summer or into the fall sometime, maybe pass a referendum. But some really interesting stuff, I think, that we heard that the whole board might really find very valuable. And then the last thing I'd just like to share is, and to me it was very exciting, that Michelle McGlynn mentioned a new youth apprenticeship in the area of education. And so we will be having student apprentices in education this year. And that's Wonderful. The action item I'm going to let Tim talk about is our middle school ELA selection. So, Tim.
Thank you, Mark. And before I get into the ELA topic, I do need to acknowledge how much work the committee put into the last meeting, because that was really quite packed with some big topics. And yes, as Mark described, the team that came in to provide the presentation on AI and where we see it going would be happy to come into the board. That might be better served in a development session than during the main meeting, just because it was a pretty weighty topic. But on to the action item. So this is the culmination of a year-long process for our middle school English language arts department. We had identified last year the need to move to formally adopted materials as a key priority to improve opportunities for our kids, both in terms of rigor, in terms of support for teachers, access for students in different needs. So at the end of May in 2023, we invited in several publishers regarding their materials. And these were materials selected primarily because of their high reports as being reviewed by third-party organizations that really tried to do a careful job examining the quality of materials and their alignment to standards, and also how frequently they were being used in Wisconsin. And at that time, it was a fairly easy decision for our middle school English teachers to narrow the playing field for the pilot to two candidates. One was the ELA curriculum for the middle grades from Amplify, and the other one was my perspectives from HMH. And so we then worked with both of those vendors to design a pilot last year where all of our middle school teachers of English and all of our students at the middle school participated in the pilot. Every student received the same piece. There was some material that was presented from the Amplify resource. There was some material presented from the My Perspectives resource. And the majority of the year, though, was our existing curriculum. At the end of this, we did a few different things. And I need to stop here, and I need to compliment all of our English teachers on the hard work. It's not easy to pilot. You have to put in extra work, particularly if you want to make sure we're not losing a beat with students, and that's always our goal. And I can't say enough for just the tremendously dedicated efforts and commitment to the process by Lynn Stenroos, who's our instructional coach at the middle school. He really did a lot to make this happen, working with the vendors, getting questions answered, and working with me and Jeff Keenis on our decision-making process. So as we approach the end, we did a review on each of the resources with the teachers to make sure the resources were fresh in their mind. Also, because My Perspectives was turning over on a new copyright, we did spend some time looking at the forthcoming copyright to see if any of the questions we had about My Perspectives were being addressed in the new copyrighted version. Then we did a few things. We did conduct a student survey, not to make that the deciding factor, but it's materials work best when they engage the students, so we were interested in what our middle school students had to offer in terms of feedback. We then looked at our decision-making criteria, and we asked our middle school team to rank the decision-making criteria, not only by rank, but also by weight. And then we had a morning meeting in early May where we stepped through a final review of what we had noticed about the two pilot resources. And then we had independent voting, which went into an average score, which we then fed into our weights of the criteria, and we got to a bottom line decision. Not unlike what you would do when you're scoring some of your competitive bidding for facilities projects and other pieces like that. And in the end, there is a very strong tilt towards Amplify, so that's what we're bringing here. Amplify was the leader on 6 of the 8 criteria. It tied with my perspectives on one criteria, and my perspectives was ahead on another. And some of the criteria that Amplify led on included the rigor and depth of knowledge of the resource, supporting all modes of writing, importantly, the ease of use for both students and teachers, as well as supporting all learners and development of speaking and listening skills. The only area where it trailed my perspectives was in our criteria for vocabulary development and construction of knowledge in Greek and Latin roots. And that's not because Amplify doesn't contain those, but they're in a supplemental part of the units. And so kind of our takeaway from our decision-making process in May was we need to, as part of our implementation work over the summer, work on making sure we know exactly where in the year we're going to tap on those supplementals to make sure that those important topics are fully centered in what our students are getting in this upcoming year. So, with that, I'll kind of open the floor up to questions, but, our teachers are very excited about this. I'm very excited to see what's going to come next for our growth. And I think there's just so much to say about this. There's a lot of resources that come with the Amplify. The quality of the texts is quite high. I was really struck by the quality of the nonfiction texts and the quality of the fiction texts. The high school is going to have to make some adjustments. I mean, the rigor of this program will result in Romeo and Juliet moving from being a 9th grade text to being an 8th grade text for us. There are some Edgar Allan Poe pieces that are currently in 9th grade that will move to 7th grade. So, I always take a lot of interest when I see feedback from the community like we saw with school perceptions. I certainly noted that rigor is on the minds of a lot of our community members, and this adoption will be a commitment to increase rigor in our middle school ELA program. I will add, although we normally think of science of reading as being primarily an elementary level concept, Amplify's work in ELA is very heavily grounded in the science of reading as it pertains to the middle level. So, ultimately this was a teacher-led decision, but I couldn't be happier with how this turned out, and I'm very enthusiastic about this.
So you need an action on this item tonight? And
Yes, we do need, we have the motion coming out of the curriculum committee, 3-0. I'd seek full approval by the board.
Tim, can you tell me what is a free with order ELA teacher in the special terms? It
Say
says
again?
free with order ELA teacher in the special terms. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, so that means that you are getting some complementary resources with that. That's not unusual for any vendor. They have, and I will say, I mean, in a world where some things are digital and some things are paper-based and sometimes a mix, but typically with a large adoption as opposed to a small purchase, they will bundle in a few pieces that if you were doing a smaller order, they might charge you separately.
Motion to move forward with Amplify for our middle school students.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
But we also, do we need a second motion for the pilot for the intermediate school?
So we don't, that's just an information item.
Oh, okay.
So one thing that's unique for us is our grade configuration. Now, we're not alone in that, but the most conventional grade configuration is K-5, 6, 8, and then a 9, 12 high school. We've increasingly noted, Amy has, in the last probably 5 years, there are fewer elementary ELA resources that go all the way up through 6th grade. And so some of the materials that we have been using are in need of replacement, and although we're very satisfied with the materials we've been using, as we look for more up-to-date resources, sometimes they're not available for that level. So we are piloting amplify based on how impressed we were with it for the middle school piece. And so the middle school piece that we formally adopted for a 7-8 middle school has a 6th grade piece. And then Amplify has a K-5 series, and we'll be looking at the 5th grade as well next year. And so, you know, the amount of money is under the approval level. It's something we want to try. It doesn't mean we're necessarily committed to it, but we don't like to do big moves like that without making you aware of it and also making the community aware of it.
The curriculum committee did vote 3-0 to allocate the funds, but it's underneath our
It
allocation
is.
needs. So that's really, doesn't need full board
No.
approval. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, next committee is the budget committee. And with Jack on, maybe Steve, you could roll with that.
Sure, thank you, Joan. So there's several agenda items that have committee motions for consideration tonight. The first one is the second draft of the 24-25 budget. I'll call everyone's attention to the agenda notes. Items 1 through 6 in the agenda notes are the same as May. So the majority of what you see in this document was approved at the May board meeting. Items through 9 are updates between May and June, relatively minor, like updates to our Fund 21, which is the gift fund of the district, updates to our building and department revenue accounts, so things like student fees, updates to Fund 50, which is a food service fund. So relatively minor changes between the months of May and June. We did indicate in the notes what changes will be coming forward for the month of July. The Budget Committee did review the second draft of the budget, is recommending approval on a 3-0 motion. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So we would need a motion to approve that if possible.
Motion to approve, second budget.
Second.
Any questions on the second draft of the budget? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay. Thank you.
So the next agenda item is consideration of 24-25 lease agreements. So we're bringing forward lease agreements with the Wisconsin Youth Company, which is an after-school program at each of our elementary schools that also operates in the summer. And then the New Teacher Project. The New Teacher Project would be relocated to Bethel Circle. So one of the new offices that we'd be building out here would be made available to them. We are recommending an increase in the Wisconsin Youth Company from $2,850 to $2,900 per building, and the New Teacher Project remaining at $350. You may recall that in the past we had a third lease for the Dane County Social Worker Program. That individual is going to be located out of their home at this point moving forward with the changes at Heritage. So we're only bringing forward the 2 leases tonight for consideration. The Budget Committee is recommending approval of both leases on a 3-0 motion.
So we would need a motion to approve those leases.
So moved.
Any questions on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you.
The next agenda item is more of a procedural item. So once a year, we do bring in front of the board a request to approve what's called our fund balance accounts. That allows the district administration to work with the school board approved auditor over the summer as the audit takes place. These accounts are what guide administration to be able to complete the audit process, knowing that the board has approved using these accounts. There are no changes recommended for audits this summer. The Budget Committee is recommending approval on a 3-0 motion.
So again, I need a motion to approve the fund balance.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And one other item. Steve?
So the next agenda item is consideration of budget revisions for 23-24. Once a year, we do bring in front of the budget committee and then the full board a request for budget revisions. There is a standard budget revision process that the DPI issues, which is attached for your review. But in the agenda, we do note what those changes are. To bring to the board members' attention, if you're not on the budget committee, there are 2 areas of cost increases that we did review with the budget committee. The first one is the district's transportation budget. We have a fuel clause for our diesel purchases, and the cost of diesel all year has been above the level of that clause, and so there have been associated fuel costs that have occurred throughout the year. The committee is asking administration to take a look at that, to look at several options moving forward. One of them would be to potentially manage our purchases over time. One would be to look at other forms of transportation like electric buses. So that's something we're going to begin that process. The second one is really isolated to just the particular school year. The district's consulting budget managed the traffic study this year, as you know, with the new school opening at Heritage and then the board reviewing other areas of town. The community survey that we heard earlier this evening, the superintendent search, which occurred throughout the first part of the year. We just had a number of consulting related costs that would definitely be viewed as not typical in one year. The 2 of them together did bring added costs to those line items. And then we reflected other changes as well. Most of them are grant related. The school library fund, different grants that the district receives are listed there as well. We are not reflecting any savings at this point. We do expect that there will be savings in some line items as well. But the negative balance as a result of all of the changes is $338,650. The budget committee is recommending approval on a 3-0 motion.
Would need a motion to accept that.
Motion to approve.
Second. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. And we do have one more item.
If the last agenda item has a 2-to-1 motion coming out of the committee, that is for a product called Data Wrangler. And this would be a new product to us. What this system does is it provides utility data to public schools. The committee had a chance to hear from Jim Copey, the president of Data Wrangler. Jim was able to review the different types of services that Data Wrangler provides. There are 3 different core services that can be provided. One is for General Fund 10 utility management. So what that system does is take a very close look at your utility data during the day and seeks to find efficiencies and to reduce what's called demand charges on your bill. There's another service for Fund 50, the food service fund. The goal of that is to identify and capture costs related to utilities for your food service fund. The third part is your community education fund, Fund 80. And what that part of the program can do is capture costs and generate data. So let's say that there's a weekend where a for-profit basketball league comes in. This product would be able to capture the added cost to the school district from a utility perspective for having that group in. The committee did spend a bit of time talking about this agenda item. The motion recommending approval was for the minimal service level, so I want to just be clear that it wasn't for all 3 parts of what this subscription service would be. It's for the Fund 10 only part, to looking at the energy efficiency savings. And that was on a 2-to-1 motion. The committee did request having an opportunity to look further at this after the meeting was over. So I did gather quite a bit of utility data and sent it out to the committee members. So I think at this point, if any of the budget committee members want to comment on what you saw as a board member and your thoughts on this proposal, I think that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, I appreciate the data. I saw all, but the two I wanted to bring up was Kettle Moraine and Milwaukee because they're kind of our comparables academically, program-wise, size-wise. And Kettle Moraine paid $26,000 for the service over 13 months, I believe it was. And they ended up with $128,000 worth of savings. Milwaukee, $23,000 for the service and the savings of $112,000. And that's just on the high use, low use, so really making sure that we're using our energy efficiently at the right times. And from my perspective, this is a real win-win for us. You know, we're with the budgetary challenges that we have. I'm really appreciative of Steve and Ally for looking into this and bringing this opportunity to us.
Thank you, Mark. I know that Dawn would like to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt, and if I start talking and someone wants to break in with a question, I can't see body language great, so like just tell me, we got a question coming in, and I'll stop talking. I would vote against it, and it's not, to be very clear, I love the idea of getting data and making adjustments to costs that, I mean, nobody responded from the parents saying, hey, I want to spend more money on energy, like that's of value to me. So I think we're all on board with the messaging of like, let's get data, let's make adjustments to our ways of working to eliminate a cost that's not really value add. I did ask for more data because I wanted to see if the math was mathing, were my words in the meeting, and then I guess what I wanted to bring up here is like what's changed since then or what I saw. So what was proposed is a 5-year contract. The 15% reduction that's seen on average was from the first year baseline, so it's not 15% year over year. And my thoughts at this point, and I'll explain my rationale, is that it's a good opportunity. I would love to see that 15% come out. One second, I'm sorry. Pardon me. I see two different approaches that I would recommend to the board to consider. One would be that we shorten the length of the contract, allow us to see that when we get these reports, are we taking it and doing actionable things that actually reduces our costs, and then we'll see that come through in the report. Or keep it as a 5-year contract, but add 2 things to the contract that I think are important. One is a competitiveness clause called meter release. And what that's saying is, hey, we've done an RFQ, we found another service company that does the exact same thing you do, but they cost 10% a month less. So you have 60 days to meet that price, or we're going to break the contract and seek other opportunities. I know there's probably not 20 million people out there doing this service, but there could be someone else that's cheaper and they haven't done an RFQ, so it just gives us that lever. And then the other lever I would want to see added is a performance guarantee, and I think they would be reluctant to accept this, but how it could be phrased is, hey, look, you're coming to us and saying we're going to have this huge return on investment, that we need to maintain this service with you for 5 years in order to continue seeing this reduction in cost. They're saying 15%. I would be comfortable with something still double digits where they guarantee that if we made good faith efforts to make adjustments to our ways of working based on the report that they're providing us with, that we see a continued reduction, whatever that percent is, over the course of that 5-year contract, and that we have to be clear about the baseline, because I would hate to see, like Heritage is my example, for a clear difference where we should expect to see energy changes at the current, I'm sorry guys, the current energy cost at Heritage should be very different at the new Heritage, enough for the performance guarantee, right? Like it would have to be some new baseline at the new building. There are other little things like that where we're making adjustments, like Prairie, where we're putting in the LED lighting. Was that because of the analysis and the reporting, or because of the changes we made as a result of that? No, I'm not as worried about that though. But I would like to see like a clear baseline put in with the performance guarantee if we go to 5 years. Otherwise, I think like a year, 18 months, 2 years, and see if we actually take it and do what needs to be done with it. So that's paying us $2,800, I wrote it, $2,500, whatever it is, a month to get this reporting. Like we need to be doing stuff with it, otherwise it's just throwing the money away. So I'm done.
Dawn, I appreciate the comments. I was thinking, I didn't think of all of those same things, but a lot of the same things. So total agreement, because I thought we're paying a lot of money to get a report. It's still up to us to do that, and what's going to be in place to make sure that's done. You know, so it's great that they're doing that, but I also thought, I think they're getting a lot of the savings maybe out of the on-demand type stuff. So if we, you know, conserving isn't on the top of our mind, we don't go and do it. Well, if we put it on the top of our mind, just without paying any money, we probably can figure out how to make a lot of savings. So I'm really in agreement with what Dawn was saying on a lot of that. Just the length of the contract seems so long for what's there. So anyway, well said, Dawn.
So would you like to make a motion to shorten that contract, or should we send it back to the budget committee to have it kind of,
I mean, I think
Look at
it's
again.
a great idea
Yeah.
that, you know, but if it's this is,
We did something comparable with our fuel savings. And we only went with a couple months as a guideline. And we're looking next year to increase that because it turned out beneficial to the district. Steve, are they requiring a 5-year commitment, or is there a shorter option?
Sure, there's not a requirement for a 5-year contract, and what we could do is, since the budget committee will need to meet in a few weeks anyways, we could just send this back for additional discussion, and I can bring forward the options so the committee can take a look at it. There is no rush on this at all, so this is great dialogue, and we certainly can continue to spend some time making sure that we have the right product for us. And Ally and I'd be happy to go back to Data Wrangler and look if there's a 6-month option, a 1 month or 1 year option, 18 months, and present that back to the committee. I think that'd be a great use of time.
If I can add one thing, one of the other pieces I would encourage the board to take a look at is there's some of the additional products that are along with it. The food service item and the Fund 80 option. Now, some of those require some policy review aspects, but I think getting into it, reviewing kind of how you're impacting it and what data you're seeing, I think is maybe a first step. But I'd encourage you to also look at the other items, because right now, for like utilization of facilities, we do some Fund 80 things for like custodial time, but we don't really adjust anything from a energy perspective, and this would allow you to start to disaggregate that data out. And similarly to food service, as far as those pieces of equipment being high draws at different points of the day, being able to then to funnel those to a different part of our budget that has a different funding source. So I think those are pieces down the line that make a lot of sense to review. But that was what I was going to share, and I think Steve's got a great recommendation to kind of bring it back through the budget and then bring it in a subsequent meeting.
perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Don. And I think that's the end of the budget committee. Moving on to facility committee, maybe I'll turn that over to you also, Steve, if you don't mind. I know we have our partners here. You guys can come up and join in. You've been kind of quiet back there.
Thank you, Joan. So there's a couple of agenda items tonight that our Vogel team is here to assist us with. So I just want to keep the two of them just separate for a moment. The first one is what's called a guaranteed maximum price for the middle school. And then secondarily, as a second agenda item, is some additional middle school subcontractor bids. So I believe we'll probably do what we did at the facility committee, and Jay will share some information on the guaranteed maximum price and what that looks like. And then I believe Adam will share information on the subcontractor bids. And then we'll close the facility committee with some information on additional capital projects for consideration. So I'll turn it over to Jay.
All right, you want me to run the show?
Go for it.
All right. Before I get into it, it was dawned on me on the way over here that this is Randy's last official board meeting, and you know, last 5 years we've had a front row seat, and you know, it's just special for our organization to be part of what you've done here, Randy. So thank you on behalf of us, and I know the whole district. You know, as a leader in our organization, I do a lot of learning from and watching, observing, listening to other leaders, and you know, being able to watch you in action, Randy, has had a huge impact on me, and I really appreciate that. So with that being said, I thought a good way to say thank you would be to present some really positive budget news tonight.
Sharpen that pencil, Jay.
Jack's not even here to say that, too.
I am here.
So the slide in front of you, again, you've seen every time we've been here pretty much, but today we're focusing on the middle school component of that, which had a budget of $99,920,000 as established as part of the 2022 referendum. And we're able to sit here today with some good news in terms of overall budget. So what you see there is a breakdown of the construction, just over $84 million, the contingency amount that we're carrying and will carry within the guaranteed maximum price. That is $3,940,000. I'd like to note that we've broken that into really two different buckets. One is which is called the construction manager contingency. That is approximately 4% of the overall construction cost. That is to be used for any items related to construction manager issues that come up through the project. Now, even though that is used for construction management items, it is also reviewed and approved by the district, any item that goes against that. For you, those of you on the facilities committee, you know, every month Steve will pull up the log for the Heritage Project, and it would be the exact same process as this. But what we've also been able to do is create a bucket of funds to the tune of $570,000 that can be used for owner contingency items. Now, if you recall on Heritage, we did do that as part of that project, but we were able to do that through some savings after the project started. So we're in a good position here today to be able to do that before we even start with the project. So that's very positive from a budget standpoint. It gives the team the ability to make decisions as we need to and bring information back to the board, and puts us in a really positive budget standing. I did mention last time we presented this, but I'll reiterate again. Due to the positive bidding results, we also were able to pull in about $1 million worth of additional scope into the project. Those were items that were previously identified as alternates to give us some triggers in case we needed to finesse the budget after the bids came in, but we were thankfully able to bring all that work in. That is all listed there on the slide. One of the larger items that is part of that, though, is the solar panels, and we're currently carrying about $750,000 for that. So again, all positive aspects in terms of budget. And I think that was all I had in terms of final GMP. Any questions? All right, I did have one more slide. I lied. As I did allude to, we are still investigating 4 or 5 different options that could save some additional money. Most of these options are related to the envelope or the exterior of the building. And so our goal before the end of the month is to be able to give the district the information to make those decisions. Since Randy's been involved throughout both the projects, we felt like it'd be good to be able to bring that information forward to have him help make those decisions before we get to the end of the month. So we'll finalize those by the end of the month, and then we'll just give a report back to the board in terms of what that means. Ultimately, we would likely add those to the owner contingency within the GMP to just give you a bigger bucket of money to manage there.
I mean, that is one that needs
Oh, yeah.
a motion, so let's, before you move on, Jay, why don't we take a look at that item? Are there any questions that you have for Jay with regards to the guaranteed maximum price and how he has structured that? Otherwise, we'd be looking for support from the board for that to kind of be the base that we then kind of build our project off of.
So we would need a motion for that.
Motion to approve guaranteed maximum price as presented.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Jane.
It's all yours, Adam, all right? So subcontractor bid awards, there's a summary from here, but Rebecca, if you want to pull up the first attachment, or Jay. So let's just do the middle one.
The middle one, yeah.
Yeah, so there's several bid awards today. This is kind of a summary level. I do have a detailed breakdown for the larger bids if we want to go through those, but we'll just start here. So the top three all had, I guess, local contractors involved, so we spent a lot of time scoping those, bidding those. You heard from a couple of those owners at the beginning of the meeting. But to go line by line, so masonry, which would be the CMU block, the brick on the exterior. We had several competitive bidders on that scope, but we're really happy with Walsh's bid. They came in under budget, so I think we're in a good spot there. Steel erection, that was Rick from Badgerland who spoke earlier. There were 3 bids that were very close with that number. That kind of shows that we're in the right spot, and they were very competitive bids. Glazing, so you also heard from Tracy with Mobile Glass. One reason we met with her specifically was kind of the large under there. We were just concerned with where her number was, but they, after several meetings and meeting with Steve, kind of reinforced that they just were aggressive and really wanted this project, so we're happy to hear that. Rebar erection is also Badgerland, so they actually offered an additional credit from getting both packages. Even though that it came in close to budget, they were significantly lower than the other rebar numbers we'd received, as Ted had pointed out. Precast is, we have some precast slabs under the musical rooms. We had 2 bidders that were within 1 or 2% for that scope, so we're happy where that ended up. Metal stud and framing, so the exterior framing and sheathing and the interior drywall, taping and finishing. Stats and Harrop was the low bidder there of the 3 bids we've received, and they were the contract performing that on Heritage as well, which worked out really well. With roofing and green roof and pavers, again, this was another scope that we had several interested bidders and 3 very, very close competitive bidders towards the bottom. And Malley Roof came in under budget there, which we were happy with. And then one final smaller scope, there's one fold-in wall partition above the gym that JWC was the vendor we expected to receive a bid from, and they were right on budget, so we're happy with that. And again, I do have the bid breakdowns with the bids for those larger contracts if we want to go through them, or if there's any questions, I can answer those.
Anybody want to see the details?
Joan, if I could mention, Jack asked during the facility committee for an update on the involvement of local subcontractors, and so in your notes, we did receive information from Vogel to respond to that request for information, so we put it in for everybody to have a chance to look at, so just note that, and obviously with the middle school to date, you could see the numbers that were included into the board book that Waunakee-based subcontractors or suppliers, if the low recommendations are approved, would be 6. So a very significant local contribution to the middle school project on top of what we've already seen with involvement at Heritage Elementary.
Thank you, Steve. So we would be looking for a motion to approve the list that Adam just went over with us.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on that? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Adam.
I had just one thing to add there. So we'll be back likely in July and August potentially with just some other smaller subcontractor work as well. But those scopes, we've scoped enough to be confident that we're carrying the right number in our GMP. It's just making that final decision next week.
Perfect. Thank you. Moving on to the capital projects approval.
Thank you, Joan. So I do want to call the board's attention to one topic within this list. So the list was presented to the facility committee and moved forward for recommendation this evening, but there was a 0 on the spreadsheet for a project identified as middle school special education because the quote had not been received by the time the facility committee had met. We did receive that quote, added it to the spreadsheet. The quote was from Vogel, so we asked Vogel to give us a quote to remodel that space. We've included that information, but I just want to make sure all the board members know that was not presented at the committee, even though it's on the list and everything else on the list was recommended for consideration. So we'd be happy to answer any questions about the number that's been added to that spreadsheet or any of the other projects that are on that list. Randy,
Yeah,
anything to
let me
add?
just add a little bit of context. One of the things that we have been looking at with regards to the middle school is as we transition some of our students with special needs up to the middle school from the intermediate school, we do have some space challenges. So one of the things that we wanted to do was investigate what options we had within the existing building to be able to accommodate for the needs of those kids. I know that we have a larger project that's planning out over the next several years, but we're still going to be in that facility for several years, and I think that's going to be very much needed for us to accommodate the needs of our children. So I would recommend strongly that we support that renovation. I think that's been vetted through a lot of venues administratively to determine what the best place and how we can do that.
So again, we'd be looking for approval of the capital project list this month.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. And the last item, Steve, is the new path.
So I'll start with what the request is. So the request is for a motion to dedicate land to the public and to provide the authority to the district superintendent to approve the legal paperwork. And I'll talk a little bit about the timing of this. So Rebecca, would you mind pulling up the plan attachment, please?
This one?
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you for pulling that up. So what we're looking at is the Woodland Drive property, and you're looking at a survey that was completed by Williamson. And what we are requesting is the area that is identified at the northern portion of the site be dedicated to the public for a right-of-way. In conjunction with this, Board Member Jack Heineman has been working through the joint review board process with the Village of Waunakee that has led to the approval of the Kilkenny West development. As a part of the Kilkenny West development, the developer's agreement included the construction of a path all the way from the corner of Woodland and Kew to our adjoining neighbor's property. Once the path gets to the adjoining neighbor's property, the Village of Waunakee then has a right-of-way to continue the path all the way to the edge of our property. What's important to note is the original design for the new Heritage Elementary School did not envision that path occurring, and certainly did not envision that path occurring this quickly. Now that the approvals have been granted, we worked with Roxanne Johnson, our civil engineer, to change the path on our property to align with the path that is going to be built this summer. So if you see where the area is on the top of the northern part of the property, that is intended to then adjoin the path that is being built to the property adjoining our neighbors. We are working on the timing of this with the village and obviously the developer, Don Tierney. In the ideal world, it will all be ready by September 1st. That may not be possible. If it's not possible, we're going to work on a temporary crosswalk location. As part of this project, the village has asked us to move the crosswalk, the permanent location, down to Ganser. So Ganser's a little bit further to the east. The students will cross at Ganser, over Woodland, onto the new path that's being constructed, and then we'll walk onto our property where it adjoins with the area that you would see there. The school district has always had in our construction budget to build the path. So we would still build the path. However, we would turn the path over as a public right-of-way, and it would no longer be district property. So the entire length of the path from Q all the way down to Eldora would be a public village-maintained path. We are requesting consideration of the superintendent being able to sign the legal documents because the timing of this project is incredibly critical. We need to move on this as quickly as we can so that Vogel at the Heritage site can finalize the redesign and coordinate the path with the path that's coming in from the east. So this is all happening pretty quickly. I know Jack's not here tonight, but I could speak to the efforts that Jack made on behalf of the district to try to line all three parts of this up, the district part, the neighbor part that the village would have to build, and then the part that the developer would have to build. I know that Jack invested quite a bit of time to try to coordinate all of that. He did put out a big goal of September 1st, and a lot of folks are moving towards that goal to see if that's possible. We want to thank Jack for his efforts, and really what you're seeing here is kind of the fruition of a lot of discussion that's taken place. And Randy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the only piece I want to add, one, thank Steve and Jack for all of their work on this. I know they've had a number of conversations and attended a lot of meetings on it. Part of the piece that we talked about at our team meeting with Vogel Brothers and Epstein was to take a look at needing to get approvals moving forward. We don't want this right away to impede our ability to hit the timelines. Part of the issue that Steve also talked about is the circle up in the northeast corner. That's the utilities. Part of what we are looking at is by moving it as a right-of-way, then the utility company needs to move those so that the path can be straight. Because we'd like to make sure that it's a straight shot, not trying to meander around other pieces. So the action tonight, which we're highly recommending to the board, is to allow for this paperwork to move forward, and then giving the superintendent the authority, either me or Dr. Brown, to then sign off on it whenever that is complete. And then that gives us then the ability for Roxanne and other partners to kind of then move ahead with getting the planning and the implementation of this to move forward without an impediment or without other action from the board here.
I compliment the great work, but for clarity's sake, the last time we saw a projection of what the neighborhood is going to look like, there was a southern path coming in up to the property. Is that Will this preclude this now, or is that still
Still there.
part of the future plans?
Still there. None of that has changed, anything coming in from the south. This is just the path along Woodland Drive that goes from Woodland and Q all the way through our property. And just wanting to make sure that it operates in the way that it's intended and in the best interest of the community. So no, the southern path is still there.
Does this include the intermediate school? Goes by both?
Yep.
Yeah.
To Eldora, right?
Goes right in front of that school, like all the way up to where that sign is.
Past Eldora?
It stops at right up to the Eldora sign, and we have to rebuild a little bit of the path to go up from the intermediate school to Woodland to get the grade right, but it pretty much stops right there on the corner.
Motion to
It doesn't exactly inform my decision, but totally out of curiosity, who would own the, like, wintertime maintenance of snow removal for the path if it's been deeded over, turned over to the village?
It's village property if this gets approved.
Okay, so I think Katie was making a motion?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Second.
And I just want to thank you for doing all this. It'll be a great safety feature for our kids. Anyway, any questions? All in favor of approval of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. All right, thank you. Thank you, Jay and Adam.
Thanks, guys.
Moving on to HR committee. We have approval of some handbooks. I think Brian is coming up to chat.
I thought we could do something new tonight, and we could actually just read through all 3 handbooks.
Oh, I like that.
Just to, kind of we'll take turn, we can just do a circle read, we'll each go page on.
Circle read, oh.
You guys don't have to leave, you could.
Are you gonna start?
Yeah, I'll start, you just tell me when to stop. Actually, I mean, just, in the purposes of valuing your time, I think, Rebecca, if you wanted to open the summary page, and then I guess I would really open it to just point out to you that we are continually seeking to revise the handbooks to make them more clear, easier to read, be a better reference. And so if we are not changing it in any substance, I don't note that in the summary. But if there's an addition or a deletion, those are the things that come into the summary page. And I guess with that, I would take, if you have any questions, any of the items that you saw in there, I would certainly invite that, or be happy to take those now, so.
Probably just with the middle school handbook with regards to wrestling.
Oh, the middle school co-curriculars?
Yes, I didn't see anything in there with respect to that, or was I missing it?
And so, in terms of the decision the board made to allow the.
Well, we
younger
allowed
students-
it, so then there's no language kind of mentioning the ability for them, for the 6th graders to participate, and then what are the consequences, or what are the needs from that? Am I?
Sure, from a staff standpoint, the decision to expand the middle school program wouldn't change there wouldn't be note of 6th graders being allowed in here. The only potential effect I think I would see is a need for potential, depending on how many students that could adjust the number of coaches that were needed. But the coaches are contained within the schedule, and so we could add coaches as needed.
I thought part of it is eligibility requirements and all that kind of stuff. You're kind of in 2 different realms here when you're in
So you're
middle
probably
school.
right
and-
now talking, what Brian's going to be talking about is kind of the HR handbooks that are just really our employee-driven benefits, work, expectations, and then the other piece is some of the items that Nick has in the consent agenda that are really more of the areas around the co-curricular.
Maybe that's what I jumped the gun on.
It could be.
You should have read all this stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, that part of, we don't get to that level of definition, I guess.
Right, okay.
Within the staff handbooks in any of the co-curriculars. We just identify the roles that are available.
So any questions on any of the handbooks? Anything that we want to spend time talking about? I want to just remind everybody that the teacher handbook is, again, a collaboration of teachers working with Brian, and as concerns come up, both union and non-union teachers are on that committee, and it's a great collaboration. Instead of having that negotiated contract, this handbook is still a collaboration of staff and administration.
Yeah, I guess I would expand. I mean, I think that a number of the items that we look to address in here, they are brought forward by employees. You know, and then they become a conversation often with the employee, maybe the supervisor, you know, the committee, you know, and we attempt to again, you know, clarify things or improve things if needed, if possible. And we also try to make them consistent from employee group to employee group. That's something that we've really worked on for the last number of years, and we continue to make the handbooks much, you know, more consistent from group to group, which I think is a positive change.
So if there are no questions or concerns, I would like a motion to approve all of the handbooks, all of our staff handbooks.
So moved.
Second?
One.
Any questions before we vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say
Aye.
no. Thank you, Brian. Policy committee.
Policy committee met and have gone through pretty much the entirety of the 600 series. I'll turn it over to Randy, who I'm guessing may turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. The 600 series really dealing with the financial side of our house. I think Steve and Allie did a nice job reviewing those. You'll see within the policies being recommended here tonight that there are some that we have kept our current policy, either because they were ones that we worked through with legal counsel, are relatively newly revised, ones that we already adopted a PRG version, or as you've seen in other series, there's been a new PRG or Policy Resource Guide sample policy that incorporates elements from many of ours that were broken out into separate policies. We brought some of those pieces together. Again, as Ted said, this has been reviewed by the administration with the recommendations per our review from the School Board Association. Ted has had a chance to review them with us as part of the policy chair, and then the recommendation here tonight was on a unanimous approval from the committee to forward them to the board. Realizing that there's a lot of policies here, I think there's 5 pages of them as far as like just how they're listed in our board book here. But we will happily answer any questions that you have. Mark did give us a few edits that he saw in there, and Rebecca corrected those. Those were just language pieces that we had missed. So again, we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, as in the past, whenever you are ready and have sufficient information, you can do this as one motion.
I would just like to make note on the policy 654.1, the free admission passes.
Yep.
I know we discussed the option to allow high school students to enter games, home games for free, just to kind of promote connections and those types of things. And I know that we decided that that wasn't something that was going to work for this year, but I would like to just make note that I would like to continue that conversation and potentially work towards that as being a goal in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. And I think what she's alluding to is there was the policy that talks about kind of the admissions to our co-curricular activities. There was a discussion from some board members wanting us to look at, could we do a free admission piece? And Nick Conrad, our athletic director, did an analysis and actually looked at the dollars and cents of that. And it was something that just at this point, given kind of our budgetary situation, we just weren't able to prioritize that move at this time. So, but it's duly noted to continue to look at, and we look at fees on an annual basis, so that's something that Steve and Allie can bring back in the future.
Mark.
Yeah, when I was reading through this, when I looked at the Golden Card Club, just, kind of hit me, and then I didn't even know we had such a thing. And is it used a lot?
Absolutely, yeah, that was a question that came up. We've handed them out as we've gone out at different speaking engagements. We've brought them along. We also, as Nick had shared, they are at the gates, and they do hand them out to people as they're coming in. And that's a piece that, I shared the feedback from our committee with Nick and Annie, and they will look at additional ways that they can promote that in the future. But Nick had shared that they do have them at the gates with our ticket takers, and they do distribute them to folks that are eligible to have them.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was hoping that we might market them a little bit.
Correct.
If we're going to have it, why not then market it?
Yeah, and Annie has that on her list. It is a piece that I think we've articulated, but we can articulate it in different ways as well.
Sure.
Yep.
Great.
All right, so if anybody is ready to make a motion. for
Motion
all
to
of them?
approve the whole bundle.
The whole bundle.
Second.
Okay, any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And we're done with the 600s. Thank you. Moving on to administrative reports or announcements.
Yep, everything this month was within committees, so I don't have any separate items there.
Okay, so the consent agenda. I know there's a lot of things in here, so if there are any questions, or Ted, if you want to go to the middle school co-curricular handbook.
I'm going to have Nick come on up, because we placed all of the handbooks that Nick has been working on, and he's been working on doing revisions to them. Since they didn't come through a committee, we put them into the consent agenda. Certainly this would be a time that if there are questions that we can direct to that. So your question, Ted.
So, yeah, I guess I gave you the heads up on. You can speak to that, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so there was nothing, I thought about that too. There was nothing in the handbook that necessarily said, well, if you're a 7th grader, this rule applies to an 8th grader. It just said if you're involved in WCMS activities or athletics, this rule applies to you. So in my brain, it was, well, if you're a 6th grader participating in wrestling, you're defaulted to, because you're on one of the middle school teams, being under that policy. You can certainly include it in some spot, but I kind of did. The only thing I changed as far as intermediate school was involved in like discipline, which was towards the code page around page 15 and stuff like that of involving the intermediate school staff, where that would be a big difference, right? Talking to the principal of that school.
Yeah. Yeah, I was only thinking in terms, because that was maybe one of the hangups of not bringing it forward,
Yep.
is the eligibility. How do you treat them? It's a little bit different now. Do they follow? If they follow what's in that handbook, I think some of the language doesn't even, some of the stuff isn't applying at the intermediate school, so.
Okay.
Or at the, yeah.
I could see, I mean, as far as like incoming 7th graders, they get a fresh, clean slate when it comes to fall sports. For a 6th grader that's participating in wrestling, it is a good point that it's a winter sport, so their first quarter, not great, but their score in intermediate school could be reflected in that. And that's where we talked about a 2 or less, or 1 or less in their intermediate grading system being academically eligible. So that's something we could clarify and add to.
Yeah. Is there something that you would see that you'd like to have clarified, or are you just kind of looking to see if Nick's aware of it and can manage it from?
Probably, because I just know it was a point of discussion when we were looking to approve that, and then I didn't notice anything in regarding it, and just so it's clear, I guess, and it doesn't.
And I mean, the other option would be you could put just a simple statement in it that since 6th graders are participating in the wrestling program, that they are held to this standard in correlation with associated pieces at the intermediate school.
Yep.
We could just make a statement like that.
Yep, page 16.
That was it.
Any other questions on anything in the agenda, consent agenda? Do we know where the F1 student is coming from? The visa student? It didn't say.
Which one?
Thought I
our
did.
foreign exchange student that's coming as an F1 student?
Just give me a sec.
Do you know anything about that?
Do you know offhand?
I'd have to open it.
I don't have that offhand. An F1 visa student is one that is coming from another country to live with a family in town. So that's how the F1 visa works. We have to, not all schools have to accept F1 visas. We chose several years ago to continue to do it.
I don't have that.
No, it's not in that information.
So they come and pay
So is this a
tuition.
student with a program, or they're visiting a specific
No,
campus?
this is not like an exchange student.
Okay.
So this is if you had a relative from Germany that came to live with you and attend school
Yep.
here, and they come under an F1 visa, they are required by the immigration to pay tuition, even if they live here, and even if they live with a relative. But we have to be a certified F1 visa recipient school in order to receive. So you have two different levels of students on here. You have the F1 visa, and then you have the Rotary Exchange student. The Rotary Exchange student is coming here under an education visa. The other one is coming under F1 visa, which is only limiting them, I believe, to 1 year. I'm sorry, John, we can find that out, but I don't know off the top of my head.
The F1 visa student doesn't have to return at the end of the year like a exchange student has to.
But they're held under criteria as far as how long their visa will allow them to be here to attend school.
Yeah.
It's not a continual visa that's going to allow you to be here for multiple years.
Anything else? If not, we can approve it all or pull anything out.
Make a motion to approve it all.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dawn. Any other questions? If not, everyone who would like to approve that, say yes.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
If not, no. Thought we'd change it up a little.
Yes.
We're still awake, we can do that.
All right, so we have approved the consent agenda. Any board business? But we have agendas and future meetings.
Yep. I'm going to start off with the ones that I know are already, I think we have right now tentatively a policy committee scheduled for the 28th of June at 8:30 a.m., pending a few things with Ted.
That's correct.
Okay. We also have on the 28th of June, a facilities committee scheduled at 7:30. We already have a DEI committee scheduled for June 25th at 5:30. And I believe we have a curriculum committee scheduled for June 14th at 7:30 a.m. The one that we haven't scheduled yet is a budget committee, and I believe we're looking at either July 3rd or July 8th.
I know Rebecca was working on that.
So
It's still up in the air. I know Dawn sent me some preferences earlier today. The 3rd is a better day for her.
Let's do that.
So I think if you're looking at the 3rd, your note says a later afternoon.
Dawn, can you speak to that? Can you meet early or late that day?
July 3rd, really any time I can make work on July 3rd.
So if we wanted to do it early when we could.
So,
Is
Early
that
would
the
be
one you
nice.
need me to sub for Jack?
Yes. I believe so, yes.
okay.
Does that work for
But to be
you?
clear, the other day can work too. It's July 3rd is just a preference. The other day can work.
And Jack is unavailable both days.
Let's go. So,
Steve, you prefer earlier than late, wouldn't you?
Sure.
July 3rd.
I mean, July 3rd
Yeah.
would be better.
We did.
Yeah, well, if you
We
can do
look at like a
the early on
7:30
the 3rd.
7:30 in the morning on July 3rd. Does that work for you,
Right.
Don?
Yeah, that's
All right, there you go.
I can do it.
So July 3rd, 7:30 for budget.
Thank you.
And I think that does it.
Okay. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
And yes.